Mother Bear locked herself out of the cabin. The baby's heartwarming solution left the town speechless. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The morning mist hung low over Pine Hollow, wrapping the small woodland cabin in a gentle embrace. Sunlight filtered through tall pines, casting dappled shadows across the porch where Emma Bennett stood watching her unusual family. At just 14 months old, little Noah had formed an extraordinary bond with Maple, the gentle mother bear who had wandered into their lives last winter. The townspeople still whispered about it, how a wild bear and a human baby could share such a profound connection that defied everything they thought they knew about nature. Emma smiled as Noah toddled across the cabin floor, his tiny hands reaching for Maple, who watched him with patient amber eyes. She had found the orphaned bear cub nearly dying in the snow and nursed her back to health. Now, fully grown, Maple had returned the favor by becoming Noah's most devoted guardian, especially since Emma's husband Jacob had left for his 3-month logging expedition up north. "I'll just gather some berries for breakfast," Emma called softly to Noah, who babbled happily in response. Maple lumbered to her feet, following Emma to the door as she always did when the young mother stepped outside. "You stay with Noah," Emma said, gently patting Maple's thick fur. "I'll only be gone a moment." The bear hesitated, then settled back beside the playing child. Emma smiled at the sight before stepping onto the porch, basket in hand. The forest beckoned with its bounty of late summer berries, and she hummed softly as she made her way down the worn path. She didn't notice the dark clouds gathering overhead or hear the first rumble of thunder until fat raindrops began pelting through the canopy. Emma hurried back toward the cabin, her basket half filled with blackberries. As she approached, a flash of movement caught her eye. Maple had stepped onto the porch, her massive form silhouetted against the cabin. "Maple, I told you to stay with Noah," Emma called, quickening her pace. The bear huffed anxiously, pacing the porch. Something was wrong. Emma's heart lurched in her chest as she sprinted the final distance. When she reached the cabin, she found the door firmly shut, with Maple outside and Noah alone inside. "No, no, no," Emma whispered, dropping her basket and rushing to the door. She turned the handle, but it didn't budge. The special lock Jacob had installed, the one that automatically clicked into place when the door closed, had done its job too well. Inside, she could hear Noah beginning to cry, his wails growing louder by the second. Maple pawed at the door, leaving long scratch marks in the wood. "Stop, Maple," Emma said firmly, though panic was rising in her throat. "We'll figure this out." The rain fell harder now, drenching them both as Emma frantically peered through the window. Noah sat in the middle of the floor, his face red and streaked with tears. He was reaching toward the door, calling out in his baby language for his mother and his bear. Emma's mind raced. The nearest neighbor was 2 miles away. Jacob had the only other key, and he was a week's journey from home. The windows were all securely latched from the inside, another of Jacob's safety measures to protect them from the wilderness. As Noah's cries grew more desperate, Maple let out a mournful sound that sent shivers down Emma's spine. The bear understood. Somehow, she understood exactly what had happened. And somewhere in the distance, the unmistakable sound of approaching voices drifted through the trees. The weekly hunting party from Pine Hollow was headed their way, and they wouldn't take kindly to finding a full-grown bear on Emma Bennett's porch, no matter how many times she had explained about Maple's gentle nature. Emma looked at Maple, then at her crying baby through the window, then at the approaching hunters. Time was running out. "Noah," she called through the door, trying to keep her voice steady. "Noah, sweetie, can you hear Mama?" The baby's cries subsided slightly at the sound of her voice. "Noah, we need your help," Emma continued, pressing her palm against the door. "Mama and Maple are stuck outside." Behind her, the voices grew louder. Emma could make out fragments of conversation now. The hunters were just beyond the tree line. In minutes, they would see Maple and reach for their rifles. "Please, Noah," Emma whispered, tears mingling with raindrops on her face. "Please understand." Inside the cabin, Noah's cries had stopped completely. Through the window, Emma watched as her baby son tilted his head, listening. Then, with determination that seemed impossible for one so young, he began to crawl toward the door. Emma held her breath. Noah was smart for his age, but he was still just a baby. The lock was complex enough that even some adults struggled with it. How could she expect her 14-month-old to understand such a task? "We need to find another way," Emma muttered, scanning the cabin's exterior for any possible entry point. The rain had become a downpour now, plastering her dress to her skin and turning the ground beneath her feet to mud. Maple huffed again, this time more urgently. The bear's ears were perked up, her body tense. She could hear the hunters, too. "Emma Bennett? Is that you out there in this storm?" called a gruff voice from the edge of the clearing. Old Man Thatcher, the leader of the hunting party, emerged from the trees, rifle casually slung over his shoulder. Behind him followed 5 other men from town, all similarly armed. "Stay back!" Emma shouted, instinctively moving to shield Maple from view. "Everything's fine." But her warning came too late. The men spotted Maple and reacted instantly, dropping their game bags and raising their rifles. "Emma, don't move," Thatcher commanded, his weathered face contorting with fear. "That beast is right behind you." "No, she's not dangerous." Emma planted herself firmly between the hunters and Maple. "Please lower your weapons. She wouldn't hurt a soul." Thatcher's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Where's your boy? Where's little Noah?" Emma's voice caught in her throat. If she told them Noah was locked inside, they'd break down the door without hesitation, and probably shoot Maple in the process. "He's safe," she managed, choosing her words carefully. "But I need your help, not your rifles. We're locked out." The men exchanged bewildered glances. "You expect us to believe that bear is just waiting patiently to be let back in?" asked Samuel Reed, the youngest of the hunting party, his finger still hovering near his trigger. "Whether you believe it or not, it's the truth," Emma replied. "Maple has been living with us since Jacob left. She's gentle as a lamb, especially with Noah." "Maple? You named it?" Thatcher's bushy eyebrows shot up in disbelief. A cry from inside the cabin interrupted the tense standoff. Noah's voice, followed by a thud and then more crying. Emma's heart leaped into her throat as she spun around to peer through the window again. Noah had tried to stand but had fallen, bumping his head against the side of a wooden chair. He was sitting on the floor now, sobbing and rubbing his forehead. Emma's maternal instinct screamed at her to break through the glass, consequences be damned. Maple reacted instantly to Noah's cries, letting out a distressed moan and pacing more frantically. The hunters raised their rifles higher, interpreting the bear's agitation as aggression. "She's worried about him," Emma explained desperately. "Just like I am. Please, help us get inside without harming Maple." Thatcher stepped forward cautiously, lowering his rifle slightly. "Emma, I've known you since you were born. You've always had a good head on your shoulders, but this—" He gestured toward Maple. "This isn't natural." "Maybe not," Emma conceded, "but it's real, and right now, my baby needs me." Inside the cabin, something strange was happening. Noah had stopped crying and was staring at the stuffed bear that sat on the small shelf near the door, a toy his father had made for him before leaving. With surprising focus, the baby crawled to the shelf and pulled himself up, using the carved wooden leg of a nearby table. Emma watched in astonishment as Noah stretched his little arms upward, fingers grasping at air just inches below the shelf. "What's he doing?" Samuel asked, his curiosity momentarily overriding his fear as he too peered through the window. "I don't know," Emma whispered, not daring to hope. With a determined grunt, Noah bounced on his chubby legs and managed to grab the edge of his stuffed bear. The toy tumbled down, but something else fell with it. A small metal object that clinked against the wooden floor. "The spare key," Emma gasped, suddenly remembering. Jacob always kept a spare tied to the bear's ribbon. I completely forgot. Noah picked up the key, examining it with fascination as it glinted in the dim cabin light. Emma tapped frantically on the window. "Noah, Noah, sweetheart, bring that to the door. Bring it to Mama." The baby looked up at the sound of her voice, his tear-streaked face breaking into a smile of recognition. He waved the key in the air, delighted by the game. "To the door, Noah," Emma encouraged, her voice breaking with emotion. "Crawl to the door." The hunters watched in silent amazement as the toddler began to make his way toward the cabin entrance, key clutched tightly in his tiny fist. But halfway there, Noah stopped, distracted by a colorful quilt that had fallen from the rocking chair. "No, no, no," Emma murmured. "Keep going, baby." Maple suddenly let out a soft, rumbling sound, a gentle call she often used when playing with Noah. The baby's head snapped up at the familiar noise, his eyes searching for his furry friend. "Bear!" he exclaimed in his limited vocabulary. "Bear!" It was one of the few words he could say clearly, and hearing it now brought tears to Emma's eyes. Noah abandoned the quilt and continued toward the door with renewed purpose. "I'll be damned," Thatcher muttered, lowering his rifle completely. The bear's calling to him. "And he's answering," Samuel added, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. Noah reached the door and placed his palms against it, looking up at the handle far above his head. The key dangled from his fingers, so close yet impossibly far from the keyhole. "He can't reach it," Emma said, her momentary hope crashing down. "He's too small." But Noah wasn't giving up. To everyone's amazement, he dropped the key and began to push his little wooden playbench, usually kept by the fireplace, inch by inch across the floor toward the door. "Smart as his father," Thatcher observed, a hint of grudging respect in his voice. With tremendous effort, Noah positioned the bench against the door. Emma and the hunting party watched in stunned silence as the toddler climbed onto the bench, wobbling precariously as he reached for the key he had left on the floor. "He's going to fall," Emma whispered, her nails digging into her palms with anxiety. But Noah managed to retrieve the key and, standing on tiptoes on his bench, brought it toward the lock. His first attempts missed completely, the key scraping uselessly against the wooden door. "Come on, Noah," Emma encouraged. "You can do it." Rain continued to pour around them, but no one noticed any more. All eyes were fixed on the remarkable scene unfolding before them. A baby, barely old enough to walk, attempting to save his mother and a bear from being locked out in a storm. After several failed attempts, Noah finally managed to insert the tip of the key into the lock, but turning it proved to be another challenge entirely. His little hands lacked the strength and coordination needed for the task. Emma's hope began to fade again when suddenly the door shifted slightly. Noah had turned the key just enough to loosen the lock. Sensing progress, the baby pushed against the door with his shoulder, his face scrunched with effort. The door creaked open just an inch. Not enough for an adult to reach in, but perhaps. Maple moved before anyone could react. With surprising gentleness, the bear extended one paw and delicately slipped a single claw into the narrow opening. With a careful motion that seemed impossible for an animal of her size, Maple pulled the door open wider, creating enough space for Noah to see out. The baby's face lit up at the sight of his mother and his bear friend. "Mama! Bear!" he squealed happily. "That's impossible," Samuel breathed, his rifle now hanging limply at his side. "I've hunted these woods for 60 years, Thatcher said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Never seen anything like this." Noah reached his little arms through the gap in the door, trying to touch Maple's fur. The bear responded by gently nudging the door open further with her nose. Emma didn't hesitate. She rushed forward and scooped Noah into her arms, pressing kisses to his damp hair and tear-stained cheeks. "My clever, clever boy," she murmured, holding him close. "You saved us." Maple huffed softly and padded into the cabin behind them, leaving the hunting party standing in the rain, their weapons forgotten as they witnessed something that would change their understanding of the world forever. But their amazement was short-lived. A deafening crack of thunder split the sky, followed by a blinding flash of lightning that struck a massive pine just yards from the cabin. The ancient tree groaned, its trunk splitting down the middle before it began to topple, directly toward the cabin. "Look out!" Thatcher shouted, but it was too late for Emma and Noah to escape. With incredible speed, Maple lunged forward, her massive body covering Emma and Noah as the enormous tree crashed through the cabin roof. The deafening sound of splintering wood filled the air as dust and debris exploded around them. Emma curled her body around Noah, shielding his tiny form while Maple's bulk protected them both. When the chaos subsided, a horrifying scene came into view. Half the cabin lay in ruins, crushed beneath the weight of the fallen pine. Rain poured through the gaping hole in the roof, soaking everything inside. "Emma! Noah!" Thatcher's voice called out from outside. "Are you alive in there?" Emma coughed, struggling to see through the cloud of dust. "We're here," she managed to call back. "We're alive." She looked up to find Maple still positioned protectively over them, the bear's massive form bearing the weight of several heavy branches that would have surely crushed Emma and Noah. Blood trickled from a wound on Maple's shoulder where a jagged piece of wood had pierced her thick fur. "Oh, Maple," Emma whispered, her voice breaking. "You saved us." The hunting party rushed into the remains of the cabin, faces pale with shock. Samuel reached them first, helping Emma to her feet while she clutched Noah tightly to her chest. "The bear," Thatcher said, pointing to Maple, who remained motionless except for her labored breathing. "She's hurt bad." Emma knelt beside Maple, tears streaming down her face as she gently touched the bear's muzzle. "Stay with us," she pleaded. "Please, stay with us." Maple's eyes, usually so bright and alert, were clouded with pain. She let out a soft whimper as Noah reached out his tiny hand to pat her fur. "Bear hurt?" the baby asked, his voice trembling as if he understood the gravity of the situation. "We need to get that wood out of her shoulder," Samuel said, studying the injury, "and stop the bleeding." "My medical supplies," Emma remembered suddenly. "They're in the storage chest, if it survived." Thatcher and two other men carefully lifted the branches off Maple while Samuel rushed to find the chest. The bear remained unnaturally still, her eyes fixed on Noah as if drawing strength from the child's presence. "Found it," Samuel called, returning with a slightly damaged wooden box. Emma handed Noah to one of the hunters and quickly set to work. her hands trembling as she prepared to remove the wood fragment from Maple's shoulder. The bear would never allow such treatment from anyone else, but as Emma worked, Maple remained calm, occasionally turning her gaze to Noah, who watched with solemn eyes from the hunter's arms. "I've never seen anything like this," Thatcher murmured, shaking his head in wonder. "A wild bear letting a human tend its wounds." "She's not just any bear," Emma replied, carefully bandaging Maple's shoulder after removing the wood and cleaning the wound. "She's family." The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the ruins of the cabin, something miraculous was happening. The hunters, men who had spent their lives viewing bears as nothing more than dangerous predators or hunting trophies, were witnessing a connection between species that defied everything they believed. As the night wore on, they worked together to create a makeshift shelter within the undamaged portion of the cabin. Maple, weak but stable, lay near the fireplace they had managed to clear and light. Noah refused to leave the bear's side, eventually falling asleep curled against her warm fur, his tiny hand resting on her bandaged shoulder. "What will you do now?" Samuel asked Emma as they sat by the fire, watching the unlikely pair sleep. "The cabin's half destroyed." "We'll rebuild," Emma answered simply. "Jacob will be home in a few weeks. Until then, we'll manage." Thatcher cleared his throat. "You won't have to manage alone." The old hunter's gruff voice had softened considerably. "We'll help you rebuild. Better and stronger than before." Emma looked at him in surprise. "You would do that? Even knowing that Maple stays with us?" "Especially knowing that," Thatcher replied, his weathered face breaking into a reluctant smile. "Any bear that would risk her life for a human child deserves a proper home." He paused, glancing at the sleeping bear and baby. "Besides, after what we saw today, I reckon there's a lot about these creatures we've been wrong about." The other hunters nodded in agreement, their expressions thoughtful as they watched Noah snuggle closer to Maple in his sleep. As dawn broke the next morning, word of the extraordinary events at the Bennett cabin had already spread through Pine Hollow. Villagers arrived in groups, bringing food, supplies, and eager hands to help with the rebuilding. Many came out of curiosity, wanting to see for themselves the bear that had saved Emma and her child. Maple, still weak from her injury, remained calm as strangers filed past, many reaching out tentative hands to touch her fur in wonder. Noah stayed by her side, occasionally babbling to her in his limited vocabulary or offering her berries from the many baskets of food the villagers had brought. By midday, the clearing around the cabin had transformed into a bustling work site. Men cut lumber and cleared debris, while women organized supplies and prepared meals for the workers. Children watched wide-eyed as Noah fearlessly played around Maple's massive form, the bear's eyes following his every move with motherly attention. "It's a miracle," whispered Martha Wilson, the midwife who had helped bring Noah into the world 14 months earlier. "In all my years, I've never seen such a thing." "Not a miracle," Emma corrected gently. "Just love, pure and simple." As the days passed, Maple's strength returned. The cabin took shape once more, larger and sturdier than before, with a special area built specifically for the bear, complete with a wide doorway that she could easily pass through and a comfortable space near Noah's crib. Stories of the remarkable bond between Noah, Emma, and Maple spread beyond Pine Hollow, drawing visitors from neighboring towns who came to witness the extraordinary friendship for themselves. Some brought gifts for Noah, others offerings of honey and berries for Maple. Even Dr. Richardson, the renowned wildlife expert from the city, made the journey to observe this unprecedented relationship between human and bear. He spent days taking notes and sketching Maple's interactions with Noah, his initial skepticism gradually giving way to astonishment. In scientific terms, what I'm witnessing should be impossible, he admitted to Emma one evening. Bears are solitary by nature, protective of their territory, wary of humans. Yet Maple defies every established understanding we have of her species. Emma smiled as she watched Noah gently stroking Maple's ear, the bear's eyes half closed in contentment. Perhaps our understanding has been too limited, she suggested. Perhaps there's more to these creatures, to all creatures, than we've allowed ourselves to see. A week before Jacob was due to return, Emma stood on the new porch of their rebuilt cabin, watching as Noah toddled across the yard with Maple lumbering protectively behind him. The bear's wound had healed well, leaving only a patch of lighter fur on her shoulder as a reminder of her sacrifice. The forest around them hummed with life, birds singing and squirrels chattering in the trees. But something had changed in Pine Hollow since that stormy day. The hunters no longer ventured into this part of the woods, having declared it a sanctuary of sorts. Children brought their parents to the edge of the clearing, hoping for a glimpse of the gentle bear and her human companion. And in the evenings, when Noah slept soundly in his crib, Emma would sit beside Maple under the stars, marveling at the twist of fate that had brought this extraordinary creature into their lives. "You know," she whispered to the bear one such night, "before you came, I thought I understood the world. I thought I knew the boundaries between wild and tame, between animal and human. But you've shown us that those boundaries are thinner than we ever imagined." Maple huffed softly in response, her warm breath misting in the cool night air. "When Jacob comes home," Emma continued, running her fingers through Maple's thick fur, "he might not understand at first, but he will. Once he sees you with Noah, he'll understand." The day of Jacob's return dawned bright and clear. Emma had risen early, preparing his favorite meal and dressing Noah in his best clothes. She had sent word to him about the cabin's destruction and rebuilding, but had deliberately omitted any mention of Maple. Some things, she decided, were better explained in person. "He's coming, Maple," she told the bear, who seemed to sense the tension in Emma's voice. "Remember how I told you about Noah's father? He's coming home today." Maple huffed and gently nuzzled Noah, who giggled and patted her snout with his tiny hands. "Bear love Papa too?" Noah asked innocently, looking up at his mother with wide, questioning eyes. Emma's heart squeezed in her chest. "I hope so, sweetheart," she replied softly. "I hope so." Around midday, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made Emma's pulse quicken. She smoothed down her dress and picked up Noah, stepping onto the porch just as Jacob's horse came into view. He looked thinner than when he'd left, his face more weathered, but his eyes lit up at the sight of his wife and son. Jumping down from his horse, Jacob rushed forward, enveloping them both in a tight embrace. "My God, I've missed you," he murmured into Emma's hair, before pulling back to gaze at Noah in wonder. "Look how he's grown. He's nearly walking on his own now, isn't he?" "He is," Emma confirmed, her smile tinged with nervousness. "Jacob, there's something I need to tell you." But before she could finish, a low growl sounded from inside the cabin. Jacob stiffened, his hand automatically reaching for the knife at his belt. "What was that?" he demanded, pushing Emma and Noah behind him. "Is there a wild animal in our home?" "Yes, but it's not what you think," Emma said quickly, grabbing his arm. "Her name is Maple, and she's—" The cabin door creaked open, and Maple's massive form appeared in the doorway. Jacob's face drained of color as he stared in disbelief at the full-grown bear standing calmly in his home. "Have you lost your mind?" he hissed, drawing his knife. "Get back, both of you." "No," Emma cried, positioning herself between her husband and the bear. "Jacob, listen to me. Maple saved our lives. She's been living with us since you left, and she loves Noah as if he were her own cub." Jacob's expression flickered between fear, anger, and confusion. "This is madness, Emma. Bears don't live with people. They don't love children. They're wild animals." As if to disprove his words, Noah squirmed out of Emma's arms and toddled straight toward Maple, his arms outstretched in greeting. "Bear!" he called happily. "Papa home." Jacob lunged forward in panic, but froze in astonishment as Maple gently lowered her head to allow Noah to wrap his arms around her muzzle. The bear's eyes, warm and intelligent, looked directly at Jacob as if assessing him. "This is impossible," Jacob whispered, his knife hanging limply at his side. "That's what everyone said," Emma replied softly, stepping forward to take his hand. "But then they saw them together. Come inside, Jacob. Let me tell you everything." Over the next few hours, as Noah played contentedly with Maple on the cabin floor, Emma recounted the extraordinary events of the past months. Finding the orphaned cub, nursing her back to health, the bear's unexpected return, the locked door, the fallen tree, and the remarkable response from the community. "The whole town knows?" Jacob asked incredulously. "And they accept this?" "More than accept," Emma assured him. "They helped us rebuild the cabin. Dr. Richardson from the city has been studying Maple for weeks. Even Old Man Thatcher brings her honey whenever he passes by." Jacob shook his head in disbelief. "In all my years in these woods, I've never heard of such a thing." "Look at them, Jacob," Emma urged, gesturing to where Noah had fallen asleep against Maple's side, the bear's protective paw gently curled around him. "This is real. This is our family now." Jacob watched the pair in silence, his expression gradually softening. After a long moment, he set his knife on the table and approached Maple carefully. The bear watched him with alert eyes but didn't move, seemingly understanding the importance of this moment. Slowly, Jacob extended his hand. Maple sniffed it cautiously, then, to everyone's surprise, gently licked his fingers. "I'll be damned," Jacob murmured, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. "Seems I've got a lot to learn about bears." As the seasons changed, the unusual family settled into a new normal. Jacob, initially skeptical, soon became as attached to Maple as Emma and Noah were. He built a special door that Maple could open herself, ensuring there would be no repeat of the lockout incident that had started it all. Visitors continued to come from near and far to witness the extraordinary bond between the bear and her human family. Children from the village would bring their storybooks to Emma, asking her to read tales of talking bears and magical forests, their eyes constantly darting to Maple, as if expecting her to join the conversation at any moment. Dr. Richardson published his observations in scientific journals, causing a sensation in academic circles. Some scoffed at his findings, dismissing them as fabrication or exaggeration. Others came to see for themselves, departing with their understanding of animal consciousness profoundly altered. As Noah grew from toddler to child, Maple remained his constant companion and protector. She taught him to find the sweetest berries, to listen for approaching storms, to move quietly through the forest without disturbing its other inhabitants. In return, he shared with her the human world of words and music and laughter. On Noah's 5th birthday, as friends and family gathered in the clearing to celebrate, Emma found herself recounting once again the story that had become something of a legend in Pine Hollow, how a mother bear had locked herself out of a cabin, and a baby's ingenuity had saved the day. "But that's not the real miracle," she concluded, as the children sat wide-eyed around her, with Maple lying contentedly in their midst. The real miracle is what happened after, how a single act of trust between species changed not just our family, but our entire community. She looked around at the gathered faces. Jacob, now an advocate for forest conservation. Thatcher, who had hung up his hunting rifle for good. Samuel, who was studying to become a wildlife researcher, and countless others whose lives had been touched by Maple's extraordinary presence. We humans like to think we're separate from the wild, Emma continued, absently stroking Maple's fur. We build our cabins and our towns. We draw lines between what belongs to us and what belongs to nature. But what Maple showed us is that those lines exist only in our minds. Noah, now a talkative 5-year-old, scrambled onto Maple's back, a position that had become his favorite perch. And sometimes, he added with the simple wisdom of childhood, you have to get locked out to find your way back in. The gathered crowd nodded in agreement, watching as the bear turned her head to gently nuzzle the boy, their unlikely bond a living testament to what was possible when fear gave way to understanding. As the sun set over Pine Hollow that evening, casting long shadows across the rebuilt cabin and the flourishing forest beyond, Emma stood on the porch with Jacob's arm around her shoulders. Inside, Noah slept peacefully beside Maple, their breathing synchronized in the quiet night. "Do you ever wonder," Jacob asked softly, "what would have happened if that door hadn't locked that day? If the storm hadn't come? If the tree hadn't fallen?" Emma leaned into his embrace, her eyes on the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I believe some doors are meant to close," she replied, "so that others can open." And in the gentle night breeze, as if in agreement, came the soft, contented huffing of a mother bear who had found her home not in the wilderness, but in the hearts of those who had once feared her kind, a sound that had become, for the people of Pine Hollow, the very definition of love transcending boundaries. The story of Mother Bear, little Noah, and the locked cabin door spread far beyond the boundaries of Pine Hollow in the years that followed. It was told in schools and around campfires, passed from parent to child as both entertainment and lesson. Some embellished it, adding fantastical elements that made Maple seem almost magical. Others stripped it down to its essence, a tale of unexpected connection and the wisdom that can come from the most unlikely sources. But in Pine Hollow itself, where the real Maple could still be seen ambling through the village with a growing Noah never far from her side, the true story needed no embellishment. It lived and breathed in the changed relationships between the villagers and the forest that surrounded them, in the newfound respect for the creatures with whom they shared the wilderness. And on quiet evenings when visitors asked how it had all begun, Emma would simply smile and say, "With a door that locked at just the right moment, a baby who understood more than we thought possible, and a bear who taught us that family isn't defined by species, but by love." 10 years passed, and Pine Hollow transformed from a small, isolated settlement into a thriving village known throughout the region as Bear Haven. Tourists and naturalists alike came to witness the remarkable relationship between humans and wildlife that had begun with Maple and the Bennett family. Noah, now 15, had grown into a thoughtful young man with an uncanny understanding of animal behavior. His childhood spent alongside Maple had given him insights that seasoned trackers and hunters twice his age could only marvel at. Many mornings, villagers would spot the pair, a lanky teenager and an aging bear, wandering through the forest, communicating in ways that seemed almost supernatural to observers. "They speak without words," Jacob once explained to a visiting journalist. "It's something in the eyes, in the way they move together, like they share the same thoughts." Maple had grown older too, her once glossy coat now flecked with gray, her movements slower but no less deliberate. The scar on her shoulder from the fallen tree had faded to a pale streak in her fur, a permanent reminder of her sacrifice. On a crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves carpeted the forest floor, Noah burst into the cabin with unusual excitement. His cheeks flushed from running. "She has cubs," he announced, eyes wide with wonder. "Maple has adopted orphaned cubs." Emma and Jacob exchanged startled glances. Maple was well past the age when bears typically reproduced, and they had assumed her maternal instincts were focused solely on Noah. "Show us," Jacob said, grabbing his coat. Noah led his parents deep into the forest, following a path known only to him and Maple. As they approached a small clearing, he held up a hand, signaling them to move quietly. There, in a hollow beneath an ancient oak, lay Maple, and nestled against her were 3 tiny bear cubs, their eyes barely open, whimpering softly as they sought warmth and comfort. "A hunter killed their mother yesterday," Noah explained in a hushed voice. "On the far side of Blackwater Ridge. Maple must have heard them crying." Emma watched in amazement as Maple tenderly nudged one of the cubs closer to her side. "But how will she feed them? She's not producing milk." "She won't need to," Noah replied. "They're old enough to eat solid food. Look." Sure enough, a small pile of berries and partially mashed nuts lay within reach of the cubs. Maple carefully rolled one of the berries toward the smallest cub, encouraging it to eat. "It's extraordinary," Jacob murmured. "She's not just caring for them, she's teaching them." Noah nodded, his expression solemn. "She told me she wants them to stay with us, in the special den you built for her. She doesn't think they'll survive the winter otherwise." Emma and Jacob had long since stopped questioning Noah's ability to communicate with Maple. Whether it was some inexplicable bond or simply an acute sensitivity to animal behavior, his predictions about Maple's actions had always proven accurate. "Of course they can stay," Emma said without hesitation. "Our home is Maple's home, and now it's theirs too." The arrival of the cubs brought new energy to the Bennett household and new challenges as well. Unlike Maple, the cubs had no prior exposure to humans and viewed them with natural suspicion. It took weeks of patient coaxing from both Maple and Noah before they would even take food from Emma's hand. One cub in particular, the smallest of the 3, whom Noah named Willow, remained especially wary, hiding whenever Jacob entered the room and growling softly if anyone but Maple or Noah approached. "She needs more time," Noah assured his worried parents. "She saw her mother killed by a human. The fear runs deep." As the cubs grew stronger and winter settled over Pine Hollow, an unexpected visitor arrived at the Bennett cabin. Dr. Richardson, now considerably grayer than when they'd last seen him, appeared at their door one snowy evening, his expression grave. "I came as soon as I heard about the cubs," he said, stomping snow from his boots as Emma welcomed him inside. "There's something you need to know." The family gathered around the fire as Dr. Richardson explained the reason for his visit. The hunter who had killed the cub's mother was part of a commercial operation that had moved into the region, ignoring established hunting seasons and conservation guidelines. "They're after bears specifically," the doctor explained grimly. "Their pelts fetch high prices in certain markets, and bear gallbladders are considered medicinal in some cultures." Jacob's face darkened. "How many men?" "A dozen, maybe more. Well-equipped, experienced. They've already decimated bear populations in the Northern Territories." Dr. Richardson glanced toward the corner where Maple lay with the cubs. "Word has spread about Pine Hollow and its unusual bear sanctuary. It's only a matter of time before they come here." A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft sounds of the cubs playing. Noah, who had been listening intently, suddenly stood. "We won't let them," he declared, his young voice firm with conviction. "Maple protected us. Now we'll protect her and the cubs." Emma reached for her son's hand. "Noah, these are dangerous men with guns. This isn't something a 15-year-old boy should be fighting." "I'm not just a boy," Noah replied, a new determination in his eyes. "I'm the boy who was raised by a bear, and I know these forests better than any hunter ever could." Over the next days, word spread throughout Pine Hollow about the threat. To the Bennetts' surprise, the village responded with immediate and unified support. Hunters like Old Man Thatcher, who had once seen bears only as trophies, now organized patrols to watch for intruders. Women prepared food for the watchmen, and children crafted warning signs to be posted along the forest boundaries. Pine Hollow Wildlife Sanctuary. Hunting prohibited. But Noah knew signs alone wouldn't deter men driven by profit. With Jacob's reluctant permission, he began organizing the village's younger residents into what he called the Forest Guardians, teams that would monitor remote trails and report any suspicious activity. "Your mother's right about one thing," Jacob told his son as they mapped out patrol routes. "You're not to engage these men if you find them. You observe and report back. Understood?" Noah nodded solemnly, though something in his eyes made Jacob uneasy. As winter deepened, the cubs grew more accustomed to human presence. Even little Willow eventually emerged from her constant state of fear, allowing Emma to stroke her head and taking particular delight in the honey cakes that had always been Maple's favorite treat. Dr. Richardson, who had extended his stay to document the cubs' development, marveled at how quickly they adapted to their unusual surroundings. "It challenges everything we thought we knew about wild animal behavior," he commented one evening, watching as the cubs tumbled playfully across the cabin floor. "These cubs should be terrified of humans, yet here they are, perfectly at ease." "It's Maple's influence," Emma explained, smiling as the oldest cub, whom Noah had named Cedar, attempted to climb onto Jacob's lap. "They trust us because she trusts us." The doctor nodded thoughtfully. "And that trust began with a locked door and a baby who found the key." He chuckled. "Life turns on such small moments, doesn't it?" But the peaceful winter routine was shattered one bitter January morning when Samuel Reed, now a strapping young man of 25, burst into the town meeting hall where villagers had gathered to discuss spring planting. "They're here," he announced, his breath coming in white clouds from his run through the cold. "The bear hunters, 3 men with rifles and steel traps, making camp at Hollow Creek." A tense silence fell over the hall, broken by Jacob's steady voice. "How far from our property?" "Less than 2 miles," Samuel replied grimly. "And they've got bear bait with them, lots of it." Thatcher rose from his seat, his aged face set with determination. "We'll send a delegation. Explain that hunting isn't permitted in these parts anymore." "And if they don't listen?" someone called from the back. "Then we make them listen," Jacob answered, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle he'd carried since the threat emerged. "We've built something special here in Pine Hollow, something worth protecting." While the adults debated strategy, Noah slipped away from the meeting, his mind already made up. If hunters were setting bait, Maple and her cubs could be in danger before any delegation reached them. Bears, even ones as intelligent as Maple, couldn't resist certain scents after a long winter with little food. He needed to warn her, to keep her and the cubs safely in their den until the threat was neutralized. Moving swiftly through the snowy forest, Noah followed the familiar path home, rehearsing in his mind how he would communicate the danger to Maple. Over the years, they had developed a system of gestures and sounds that went beyond what others could understand. But conveying something as complex as human hunters with guns would be challenging. When Noah reached the cabin, however, he found the door to Maple's special den standing open, snow drifting across the empty threshold. "Maple," he called, his voice cracking with sudden fear. "Cedar? Willow?" Only silence answered him. With growing dread, Noah searched the cabin and the surrounding area, finding nothing but paw prints leading toward Hollow Creek, directly where the hunters had been spotted. "No," he whispered, his heart pounding with terror. "No, no, no." Without pausing to leave a message for his parents or to gather supplies, Noah plunged into the forest, following the trail of bear tracks through the deepening snow. The cold bit at his face and hands, but he barely noticed. Every sense focused on finding Maple and the cubs before the hunters did. As he neared Hollow Creek, Noah slowed his pace, moving as silently as Maple had taught him. The forest here was dense with pine and spruce, providing cover as he crept forward. Soon, the smell of wood smoke reached his nostrils, followed by the murmur of male voices. Dropping to his stomach, Noah crawled through the underbrush until he could see the hunters' camp. 3 men sat around a small fire, cleaning their rifles and checking equipment. Several yards away, half hidden behind a fallen log, Noah spotted what had drawn Maple from the safety of her den, a pile of bloody meat, doused with honey and other strong-smelling attractants. But where were Maple and the cubs? Noah's question was answered by a soft whimper from somewhere to his right. Turning his head cautiously, he spotted little Willow huddled beneath a thicket of brambles, her dark eyes wide with terror. Of Maple and the other cubs there was no sign. With agonizing slowness, Noah inched toward Willow, making the gentle huffing sound that Maple used to calm her cubs. The small bear's ears perked up at the familiar noise, but she remained frozen in place. "It's okay," Noah whispered, extending his hand. "It's me. We need to get you out of here." Willow hesitated, then crept forward and pressed her muzzle against Noah's palm. Her fur was wet and matted with snow, and she trembled violently from cold and fear. "Where are the others?" Noah asked, knowing she couldn't answer but hoping his tone would convey his meaning. "Where's Maple?" As if in response, a sharp crack echoed through the trees. A rifle shot. The hunters by the fire leaped to their feet, grabbing their weapons. "That'll be Harlan," one of them said. "Sounds like he found something." Noah's blood ran cold. Scooping Willow into his arms, he retreated deeper into the underbrush, mind racing. The shot had come from the east, toward the frozen pond that fed Hollow Creek. If Maple and the other cubs had been heading that way— "Stay here," he whispered to Willow, tucking her into a hollow beneath a massive spruce. "Don't move until I come back for you." The small bear whimpered, but curled into a tight ball, instinctively understanding the need to remain hidden. Noah covered her with pine branches for additional camouflage, then set off toward the pond, moving as quickly as he dared while maintaining silence. As he neared the water's edge, voices carried clearly through the winter air. "Biggest damn bear I've ever seen," a gruff male voice boasted. "Must weigh 600 pounds if she's an ounce." "You hit her clean?" asked another voice. "Shoulder shot. She won't get far. Got one of the cubs too, but the other one bolted." Noah's heart threatened to burst from his chest as he crept close enough to see through the trees. There, on the frozen pond, lay Maple, a crimson stain spreading across the ice beneath her massive form. Beside her, motionless, was Cedar, the largest of the 3 cubs. 2 men stood over them, rifles ready. One prodded Maple with his boot, and to Noah's astonishment she growled weakly in response. She was alive, for now. "Best finish her," said the taller hunter, raising his rifle. "Hide'll be worth more without another bullet hole, but I'm not taking chances with a bear this size." Something snapped inside Noah. Years of his mother's gentle warnings about staying safe, his father's lessons about avoiding confrontation, all vanished in a rush of primal rage. Before he could think, he was running, bursting from the tree line with a roar that could have come from Maple herself. "Get away from them!" he screamed, charging across the ice. The hunters spun in shock, momentarily too surprised to raise their weapons. Noah used that split second of hesitation to place himself between the men and Maple, arms outstretched as if he could somehow shield her massive body with his own. "Boy, you'd best step aside," the taller hunter warned, recovering his composure and leveling his rifle. "That bear's our kill." "She's not a kill," Noah snarled, sounding more animal than human, even to his own ears. "She's my family, and you shot her." The hunters exchanged glances, clearly wondering if they were dealing with a madman. "Don't know who you are, kid, but that there's a wild animal," said the second hunter, his rifle still trained on Maple. "Now move aside before you get hurt." Noah didn't budge. Behind him, he could hear Maple's labored breathing, feel the warmth radiating from her wounded body. Cedar lay unnervingly still, but Noah couldn't bear to look at him yet. "This is Pine Hollow territory," Noah declared, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Hunting bears is forbidden here, everyone knows that." The taller hunter spat onto the ice. "We don't answer to local superstitions. Bear hunting's legal in this state, and we've got licenses." "Not here," Noah insisted. "Not these bears." A tense silence fell, broken only by the groan of ice beneath their feet and Maple's ragged breathing. Noah knew he was out of his depth, facing armed men who clearly had no qualms about violence, but he wouldn't abandon Maple. Just as the standoff seemed about to break, a new sound interrupted. A chorus of voices calling Noah's name, accompanied by the crunch of many feet on snow. "Noah! Noah Bennett!" The hunters turned nervously toward the approaching sounds, then back to Noah. "Bennett," the taller one repeated, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "You the bear boy? The one from those newspaper stories?" Before Noah could answer, the search party broke through the trees, Jacob and Emma in the lead, followed by Thatcher, Samuel, and at least 20 other villagers. Many carried rifles or shotguns, but others wielded pitchforks, axes, and whatever implements they had grabbed when word spread that Noah was missing. "Noah!" Emma cried, rushing forward only to freeze at the sight of Maple bleeding on the ice. "Oh, God, Maple!" Jacob assessed the situation with a glance, stepping protectively in front of his wife while keeping his rifle trained on the hunters. "You boys picked the wrong bears to hunt," he said coldly, "and the wrong village to trespass in." The overwhelming show of force seemed to deflate the hunters' confidence. They lowered their rifles slightly, though their expressions remained defiant. "We didn't know they were special bears," the shorter one offered weakly. "How were we supposed to know?" "The signs at every forest entrance might have been a clue," Thatcher growled, his weathered face tight with anger. "Now, drop those rifles before I forget I'm a God-fearing man." As the standoff on the ice resolved itself, the hunters reluctantly surrendering their weapons and being led away by several grim-faced villagers, Noah finally allowed himself to kneel beside Maple, her warm brown eyes, clouded with pain, fixed on his face. "Help is here," he whispered, stroking her head as tears began to flow freely down his cheeks. "Just hold on. Please hold on." He turned to Cedar, gently touching the cub's side, and was rewarded with the faintest rise and fall of breathing. The cub was alive, if barely. "Willow's safe," Noah told Maple, leaning close to her ear. "She's hidden in the spruce thicket, and we'll find Aspen." The third cub, who must have fled when the shooting started. Maple made a soft sound, something between a groan and a huff, then lifted her massive paw with obvious effort and placed it on Noah's knee. The gesture, so deliberate, so tender, broke something in Noah. He collapsed against her, sobbing into her fur as his parents and the villagers looked on in silent witness. Dr. Richardson, who had been part of the search party, stepped forward with his medical bag. Though trained as a human physician, he had studied animal medicine extensively since meeting Maple. "Let me see her," he said gently, kneeling beside Noah. "If the bullet missed her vital organs, we might be able to save her." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Under Dr. Richardson's direction, the villagers constructed a makeshift sled large enough to transport Maple back to the Bennett cabin. Moving a wounded bear weighing over 500 pounds across snow-covered terrain proved an enormous challenge, requiring the strength of nearly every able-bodied man in Pine Hollow. Cedar, whose injury was less severe, a bullet graze along his flank, was carried by Jacob. Noah refused to leave Maple's side, but sent Samuel to retrieve Willow from her hiding place. Of Aspen, the third cub, there was still no sign despite several search parties combing the woods. By nightfall, Maple lay on a bed of blankets before the fireplace in the Bennett cabin, her wound cleaned and bandaged as best Dr. Richardson could manage. The bullet had passed through her shoulder, miraculously missing both her heart and lungs, but she had lost a dangerous amount of blood. "The next 24 hours will tell," the doctor said quietly to Emma and Jacob as Noah sat vigil beside the bear, with Willow and Cedar nestled against him. "I've done all I can. The rest is up to her strength and will to live." "She'll fight," Noah said without looking up, his hand resting on Maple's broad head. "She has cubs to raise." Throughout the night, villagers came and went, bringing food, fresh bandages, and silent support. Many simply sat for a while, bearing witness to the extraordinary bond that had come to define their community. Old Man Thatcher arrived just before midnight, his face grave as he pulled Jacob aside. "The hunters have been locked in the meeting hall for now," he reported. "They're part of a larger group. Said there's 8 more of them coming from the north." Jacob's expression hardened. "Then we'd better be ready when they arrive." As dawn broke, bringing with it a fresh snowfall that blanketed Pine Hollow in pristine white, Emma found Noah still awake, still maintaining his vigil. Maple's breathing had grown stronger through the night, and some color had returned to her gums, a positive sign, according to Dr. Richardson. "You should rest," Emma told her son, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You've been up all night." Noah shook his head. "I can't leave her, not until I know she'll be okay." Emma sat beside him, studying his profile. No longer the round face of a child, but the sharper angles of the young man he was becoming. "You know," she said softly, "when you were just a baby, it was Maple who watched over you while I gathered berries. She never took her eyes off you, not for a second. She loved you before she even understood what you were." Noah nodded, a faint smile touching his lips despite his exhaustion. "And now it's my turn." A commotion outside interrupted their quiet moment. Voices raised in surprise, followed by quick footsteps on the porch. The door flew open to reveal Samuel, his face flushed with exertion and wonder. "Noah," he called, "you need to come see this." Reluctantly leaving Maple under Emma's watch, Noah followed Samuel outside. The sight that greeted him stole the breath from his lungs. There, at the edge of the clearing, stood a procession unlike any Pine Hollow had ever witnessed. Dozens of bears, black bears of all sizes, from full-grown adults to yearling cubs, had emerged from the forest and now stood in silent formation, as if waiting. And at their head, trembling but determined, was little Aspen, the missing cub. "It's impossible, Doctor," Richardson whispered, having followed them outside. "Bears don't travel in groups like this. They're solitary by nature." But the evidence before them defied all scientific understanding. One by one, the bears advanced into the clearing, forming a circle around the Bennett cabin. They made no aggressive moves, simply stood with their dark eyes fixed on the building where Maple lay wounded. Inside, alerted by the stunned silence that had fallen over the household, Emma looked out the window and gasped, "Jacob, come see this!" As the family gathered at the windows in disbelief, Maple stirred for the first time since being brought home. With tremendous effort, she raised her head, nostrils flaring as she caught the scent of her wild kin. "She knows they're here," Noah said, returning to her side. "But how did they know about her? How did they find us?" No one had an answer, but as the morning wore on, the bears remained, sentinel-like, around the cabin. Aspen rejoined his siblings, and as word spread throughout Pine Hollow, villagers came to witness the extraordinary gathering. "It's like they're standing guard," Samuel observed, watching from a respectful distance, or paying respects, Thatcher added, his gruff voice unusually soft. By midday, as the bears continued their silent vigil, news arrived that the rest of the hunting party had been intercepted at the northern boundary of Pine Hollow territory. Faced with the united front of determined villagers and the extraordinary sight of dozens of bears peacefully assembled, the hunters had chosen to retreat rather than risk confrontation. "Never seen anything like it," reported one of the villagers who had been on the boundary patrol. "These tough men with all their guns and bravado, turned away by the sight of bears standing shoulder to shoulder with humans. They couldn't make sense of it." Inside the cabin, Maple continued to improve, her natural resilience aided by Dr. Richardson's careful treatment and Noah's constant attention. By evening, she was able to take water and small amounts of food, though she remained too weak to stand. As darkness fell, most of the wild bears melted back into the forest, but a few remained, the largest and oldest among them, maintaining their silent watch throughout the night. "It's as if they understand exactly what happened," Jacob marveled, watching from the porch as Noah brought food and water to the remaining bears, moving among them with complete confidence. "As if they know Maple was shot protecting her cubs, and they've come to stand with her." Emma leaned against her husband's shoulder, her mind returning to that day long ago when a locked door had first brought Maple into their lives. "Maybe they do understand," she said softly. "Maybe we've underestimated them all along." Over the next days, as Maple's condition steadily improved, an uneasy peace settled over Pine Hollow. The captured hunters were eventually escorted to the county sheriff with sworn statements about their illegal activities, and news spread throughout the region about the extraordinary assembly of bears that had come to Maple's aid. Visitors began arriving once again. Not just curious tourists and nature enthusiasts, but officials from wildlife agencies, conservation organizations, and educational institutions. All came seeking to understand what Pine Hollow had discovered about coexistence with creatures long feared and misunderstood. Professor Eleanor Blackwood, a renowned expert in animal cognition from the State University, spent several weeks observing Maple and her cubs, as well as the wild bears that continued to visit the Bennett property in smaller numbers. "What you've created here," she told Emma and Jacob one evening as they watched Noah and the cubs playing in the twilight, "challenges everything we thought we knew about animal consciousness and interspecies relationships. These bears aren't just tolerating human presence or responding to food rewards. They're demonstrating complex social awareness, emotional recognition, and even what appears to be a form of cultural transmission across generations. Jacob nodded, watching as Noah demonstrated to Cedar how to gently roll over a log to find insects beneath, a skill Maple had taught him years earlier, and which he was now passing back to her adopted cub. "It started with trust," he said simply. "One bear, one child, one moment of crisis that could have ended in fear, but instead ended in connection. By spring, Maple had recovered enough to venture outside again, though she would always carry the scar of her encounter with the hunters and a slight limp from the damage to her shoulder. The wild bears had largely returned to their solitary lives in the forest, but occasionally one would appear at the edge of the clearing, as if checking on Maple's progress. As the forest burst into new life around them, the Bennett family faced a decision they had been avoiding throughout the winter. The cubs, now nearly yearlings, were approaching the age when they would naturally leave their mother to establish their own territories. But these were no ordinary cubs, and Maple was no ordinary mother. "What do you think they'll do?" Emma asked Noah as they watched the cubs wrestle on the new grass, their winter coats shedding to reveal sleeker, darker fur beneath. Noah considered the question seriously, his eyes tracking the subtle communication between Maple and her adopted offspring. "Aspen will go first," he said after a moment. "He's always been the most independent. Cedar might stay another year. He still favors that leg where he was shot, and Willow ... He smiled fondly at the smallest cub, who rarely strayed from Maple's side. Willow might never leave. As if aware they were discussing her future, Willow looked up, her dark eyes meeting Noah's across the yard. In that gaze was an intelligence and awareness that still took Emma's breath away, even after years of witnessing the extraordinary consciousness that Maple had first revealed to them. "And what about you?" Emma asked her son softly. "You'll be 16 soon. Most boys your age are thinking about their futures, making plans." Noah's expression remained serene. "My future is here," he said with quiet certainty. "With them, with all of them." He gestured toward the forest, encompassing not just Maple and her cubs, but the wider community of bears that had revealed themselves during the crisis. There's so much more to learn, so much more to understand, and someone needs to make sure what happened to Maple and Cedar never happens again. That evening, as the family sat on the porch watching fireflies begin to dance at the edge of the woods, a low, melodious sound drifted from the forest. A series of gentle huffs and rumbles that made Maple lift her head in immediate recognition. "What is it?" Jacob asked, noting the sudden alertness in both the mother bear and her cubs. Noah closed his eyes, listening intently to what, to other human ears, might have sounded like random animal noises. But his lifetime with Maple had attuned him to nuances others missed. "It's a gathering call," he said, opening his eyes with wonder. "They're calling Maple to bring her cubs. There's something they want to show them." Emma felt a flutter of anxiety. "Is it safe? After what happened?" Noah smiled reassuringly. "Safer than ever. The bears know what happened, too. They've been watching the forest boundaries ever since. No hunter would get within miles without them knowing." As Noah spoke, Maple rose to her feet and ambled toward the tree line, looking back once as if to confirm her family understood her intention. The cubs bounded after her, excitement evident in their bouncing gait. "They want me to come too," Noah said, standing. "Will you come with us?" Jacob hesitated, but Emma was already reaching for her shawl. "We wouldn't miss it," she said, taking her husband's hand and pulling him to his feet. "Whatever it is." The family followed Maple and the cubs into the darkening forest, moving quietly along paths worn smooth by years of use. Fireflies illuminated their way like tiny floating lanterns, and the rich sense of spring earth and new growth surrounded them. After 20 minutes of walking, they reached a clearing Noah had never seen before, a perfect circle of meadow grass surrounded by ancient pines, and there, gathered in the fading light, were bears, dozens of them, from massive adults to tiny spring cubs, all sitting in what could only be described as a ceremonial arrangement. "It's a council," Noah whispered in awe. "A bear council." As Maple entered the clearing, the assembled bears made way, creating a path to the center. She moved with dignity despite her limp, head held high, cubs trailing behind her. At the center of the circle sat the largest bear Noah had ever seen, an ancient male with a grizzled muzzle and wise eyes. To the Bennetts' astonishment, this patriarch rose on his hind legs as Maple approached, towering nearly 8 feet tall, then gently placed his massive paws on Maple's shoulders in what could only be described as a gesture of respect or blessing. The cubs watched with wide eyes as their mother received this acknowledgement, and then, one by one, the other bears rose and touched noses with Maple, or gently patted her cubs in greeting. "They're honoring her," Emma realized, her voice thick with emotion, "for protecting her cubs, for surviving, for building a bridge between our worlds." Noah nodded, tears streaming freely down his face as he watched the ceremony unfold. "All these years," he said softly, "we thought we were teaching Maple about our world. But she was teaching us about hers all along." As the bears completed their ritual, Maple turned and looked directly at the Bennett family standing at the edge of the clearing. Then, with deliberate steps, she approached and nudged Noah forward into the circle. A murmur, there was no other word for it, ran through the assembled bears as Noah entered their sacred space. Some shifted nervously, but none retreated. The patriarch watched with inscrutable eyes as Noah moved to stand beside Maple, his hand resting lightly on her scarred shoulder. What happened next would be debated by scientists and naturalists for generations to come. Some would call it coincidence, others conditioning, still others a form of intelligence humans had failed to recognize. But for the Bennett family and the villagers of Pine Hollow who would later hear their account, there was no question about what they witnessed in that forest clearing. One by one, in perfect silence, each bear in the circle rose onto their hind legs, forming a ring of towering figures around Noah and Maple. Then, as if coordinated by some unseen signal, they all lowered themselves back to all fours in perfect unison, a gesture that, in bear communication, signified ultimate acceptance. The forest held its breath. Even the evening birds fell silent, and in that perfect hush, Emma understood what she was witnessing. Not just the inclusion of her son in some ancient bear ritual, but the dawn of a new relationship between species that had feared and hunted each other for countless generations. In the years that followed, Pine Hollow would become known throughout the world as the place where humans and bears had forged an unprecedented peace. The Bennett property would eventually be designated as the nucleus of a larger wildlife sanctuary, with Noah, now Professor Bennett, the world's foremost expert on bear behavior and communication, serving as its chief guardian and interpreter. Maple lived to a remarkable age for a bear, watching her adopted cubs grow and disperse, though Willow, as Noah had predicted, remained close to home, and eventually accepting a new generation of orphaned cubs into her care. When she finally passed, peacefully and surrounded by both human and bear family, her burial in the sacred council clearing was attended by every resident of Pine Hollow and bears from miles around. A ceremony that transcended the boundaries between species. On the 20th anniversary of that fateful day when a mother bear had locked herself out of a cabin and a baby found the key, Emma Bennett sat on the porch of their expanded home, watching her grandchildren play in the yard under the protective gaze of Willow, now a majestic adult bear with silver streaking her muzzle. Grandmother, called 7-year-old Lily, Jacob and Emma's eldest grandchild. Tell us again about the day Maple saved you from the falling tree. Emma smiled, patting the seat beside her. The children gathered close, their eyes bright with anticipation, though they'd heard the story countless times. Well, Emma began, it was a terrible storm, much like the one that's brewing now. She gestured to the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. And just as we thought we were safe inside the cabin. As Emma recounted the tale, Noah emerged from the forest path, a clipboard in hand, and a young researcher at his side. At 45, Noah Bennett had become a striking figure, tall and lean, with kind eyes that still held the same connection to the natural world he'd developed as a child. The wildlife sanctuary he'd established had grown to protect thousands of acres, and students came from around the world to study his methods of interspecies communication. Another perfect day of data collection, he announced, joining his mother on the porch. The new bear family in the eastern sector has accepted the tracking collars without any stress. Emma studied her son's face, so much like Jacob's, who had passed 5 years earlier after a long and fulfilled life. Your father would be so proud, she said softly. Noah nodded, his gaze drifting to the small cemetery plot visible at the edge of the clearing, where Jacob rested beside Maple's memorial stone. Though the bear had been buried in the sacred council clearing, the family had placed a marker for her at home as well. I know, he replied. He told me so before he left us. A rumble of thunder interrupted their moment of remembrance, and Noah quickly helped his mother gather the children and head inside just as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. As they settled in the comfortable living room, decorated with photographs documenting their extraordinary journey, Noah as a baby with young Maple, the rebuilt cabin after the tree fell, the gathering of bears during Maple's healing, Noah's graduation with Willow at his side, Emma found herself drawn to the oldest photo of all. It was a simple image, yellowed with age. Baby Noah sitting on the floor of the original cabin, holding up a key with delight, while Maple looked on with what could only be described as pride. Beneath it, in Jacob's careful handwriting, were the words, "The day that changed everything." "Grandmother," asked little Ethan, the youngest at just 4, "do you miss Maple?" Emma gathered the child onto her lap, her eyes misty with memories. "Every day," she admitted. "But she's still with us in so many ways." As if to confirm her words, a low, gentle huffing came from the special bear entrance Jacob had built decades ago. Willow lumbered in, shaking rain from her coat, before settling near the fireplace in the spot that had always been Maple's. "You know," Noah said, looking around at the gathered family, "there's something I've never told any of you. Something that happened the night before Maple passed." The room fell silent, even the youngest children sensing the importance of his words. "She called me to her side," Noah continued, his voice soft with reverence. "She was very weak by then, but she placed her paw on my hand and looked into my eyes in that way she had, like she could see straight to your soul. And then she did something she'd never done before. She made a sound over and over, shaping it carefully until I realized." His voice broke slightly. She was trying to say my name. Tears flowed freely down Emma's cheeks as Noah went on. "In that moment, I understood that the division we've created between humans and animals is an illusion. The capacity for love, for connection, for understanding. It was always there. We just needed to listen differently. He smiled through his own tears. Maple taught us that, and now we're teaching the world. Outside, the storm raged on, lightning illuminating the sanctuary where bears and humans now lived in harmony. But inside the Bennett home, wrapped in the warmth of family and memories, there was only peace. The enduring legacy of a mother bear who had locked herself out of a cabin, a baby who had found the key, and the boundless love that had unlocked something far greater. A new understanding between species that would change the world forever. As the evening deepened and the children fell asleep by the fire, Emma stepped onto the covered porch to watch the storm. The rain had softened to a gentle patter, and through breaks in the clouds, stars peeked out, reflecting in puddles across the yard. "You were right, Jacob," she whispered to the night air. "Some doors are meant to close, so others can open." A gentle breeze stirred her gray hair, carrying with it the scents of pine and wildflowers and something else. Something wild and familiar that made her smile through her tears. In the forest beyond, a chorus of soft huffs and rumbles rose from the Bear Council clearing. A lullaby of sorts, a reminder that they were there, watching, remembering, understanding. And somewhere in that chorus, Emma could have sworn she heard Maple's voice, telling the story of a locked door, a found key, and the love that had transformed a village, a forest, and the hearts of all who called it home. In Pine Hollow, where bears and humans had learned to speak each other's languages, it was said that on quiet nights, if you listened carefully near the Bennett cabin, you could hear the echo of a baby's laughter mingling with a mother bear's contented huff. The simple sounds that had started it all, reverberating through time, inviting future generations to unlock new doors between the worlds we only thought were separate.